Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm Amanda, an assistant community manager for Common Ground. I'll just give you a little bit of background of what Common Ground is before I hand the floor over to John. Common Ground is actually Southeast Asia's fastest expanding co-working space, and we have presence in the Klang Valley, Penang in the Philippines, as well as Thailand, with plans to further expand. We're very... Thank you so much for joining. We're super excited to actually be in partnership with Thoughtful. They've been so wonderful and so accommodating to actually extend this to all of our members. And we really, really look forward to providing you with so much content this evening. And now I will hand the floor over to John. Over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. Hi, everyone. My name is John, and I'm a licensed counselor and a mental health coach on Thoughtful Chat, specializing in positive psychology and using a psychoanalytical framework. And I work primarily with working professionals and adolescents. I'm also currently conducting my PhD research in the area of social and behavioral studies with the University of Malaya. Now, first of all, I'd like to thank our partners at Common Ground for having us here today. And thanks to all of you who are present here today. Hope we can make the best of our time here today. And before we begin, I'm going to share a little bit about Thoughtful. Now, Thoughtful is a digital mental health company. Through our Thoughtful Chat app, a subscription-based mobile chat platform that connects users to certified mental health professionals so that you can access daily bite-sized coaching anytime, anywhere. Whether it is managing stress at work or at home, or you simply hope to achieve your personal and professional goals, our professionals work directly with users through unlimited texting. You can find more information about us at www.thoughtful.world, and that's thoughtful with a double L. Right, and so just to go through my flow for today, what's going to happen is I'm going to try and present whatever that I have, the content that I have, and what I need you guys to do is also to engage with what it is that I'm saying. And I'm going to throw out a question or two every now and then. And what you could do is you could respond to those questions in the chat box that you see on YouTube right now. And towards the end of it, that would be the first part of my session. The second part of my session, after I presented all the slides that I have, what we're going to do is I'm going to try and pick out maybe one or two questions that you have or certain points that may need a little bit more clarification. And then we're going to have a conversation about those points as well. Yep, so here goes. Now, this is my objectives for today. Before I start explaining the objectives, I'm thinking, how many of you have actually been through a talk on resilience? Is resilience something that you're familiar with? If it is, do put a yes on the chat space. Right, and my objectives for today, it's threefold really. The first one is to understand resilience. So I'm hoping that we would come out of this with some kind of a common understanding on what resilience means. But second is probably more important than the first. It's about recognizing resilience in action, right? So how does resilience look like? That's like my second goal for today. And my third goal for today would be to explore the practical ways to support resilience. Right, so without further ado, let's go straight to the definition that I have over here. Now, resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. Now, that might be a mouthful. To break that down a little bit, these are 3 points that we need to remember about resilience. First of all, resilience is about bouncing back, and it is also about growth. Right, why do I need to mention this? Well, first of all, if your life is going pretty smooth and you're facing a certain adversity, what happens is that you go on a low and then you need to bounce back, right? Resilience could also mean going one step further. Now, what that really means is that it's going to be, you're not just bouncing back, but it's also going to involve growth. So that's one of the thing. It's not just coming back to where you started, but it's going further from where you first begun. Now, secondly, and this is also important, resilience is not a personality trait. So it's not true that some people are more resilient than others, although it might appear that at certain times, certain people look or act more resilient than others. It's not something that's ingrained in your personality, right? Which means that if I am resilient today, I could be less resilient tomorrow. It just depends on how I adapt to the stresses that I face. And last but not least, resilience involves two aspects. It involves positive adaptations and it involves adaptations in the face of adversity. So we can't really measure resilience without adversity. Yeah. So if you're good, if your life is going like completely perfect and you're all positive about it, you can't really say that you're resilient. Resilience means that you got to put it to the test with adversity. So resilience is really about a trait of bouncing back from a bad time, from adversity. Right. Yeah, so this is my next slide. Now here, I need you guys to walk with me through it. Now, I need you guys to think of a recent difficult experience that you faced. It could be anything at all. It could be something small, like, you wake up one morning and your car doesn't start and you're late for work. Or it could be something even more serious, like, perhaps the death of a loved one, perhaps. Or it could be anything at all. Now think of an experience that is negative. What was this experience and how did it feel like, right? Now, if you are anything like me, the moment I experience something that's negative, it's hard for me to want to stay with that feeling. So what I try to do is I try to push that away. I try to get rid of that feeling in one way or another, right? And most of us, when we try to get rid of that feeling, there's only one of two ways we could do that. And one is a positive way and the other is a negative way. So if we are prone to having negative adaptations or negative coping strategies, what that would look like would be like addiction, complete avoidance of whatever it is that you're facing. You just go away. It's like, I don't want to deal with the problem, so I'm going to adapt to it in as negative a way as I could possibly think of. In fact, when we think of the more extreme negative adaptations, things like suicide, right? Suicide is not really about taking your own life. It's actually about taking away the pain. That's essentially what people are looking for when they aim to commit suicide, right? But how did you get through this? What are your techniques, right? So this is a part where if you could share, it'd be great. It'd be great if you could just put it on the chat section over there. Like, how did you get through the difficult experiences that you've faced recently? Now, moving on, we've got a little framework over here, and this framework would help us understand how resilient adaptations work. Now, resilient adaptations have got two aspects to it. So there's the external aspect where you build external resources, and then there's the internal aspect where you build internal strengths of dealing and managing with your emotions internally, right? So resilience is not just about modifying the way you think. It's not just about changing your feelings. It's actually about gathering resources, building connections, placing yourself in a place that is safe and supported, right? So there is an external aspect involved to it as well. And when we could put together the external and the internal aspects together, what you get is successful, resilient adaptations. And again, this might change from one time to another. So you could be resilient today, but something could happen that is a bit more severe or slightly more different tomorrow, and that would make you a little bit less resilient than you are today. And that's perfectly fine. It's not a personality trait. What's important is that we understand how we cope so that we are able to repeat the successes that we have had in the past. And to go through this, I'm actually going to talk about Amy. So Amy is this fictional character. She's got nothing to do with anyone alive or dead. And Amy, due to the pandemic, Amy spends most of her time working from home and is feeling stressed and lonely. She feels pressured to perform better at work, to protect her job security, and feels like she's not performing as well as her colleagues. Amy feels like life is currently stagnant and that she can't seem to find the motivation to progress. Now, before I go any further, how many of you can relate to Amy? Does Amy's situation sound anything familiar to what you've been facing or what somebody that you know might have been facing? If you are someone who could relate to Amy, then Amy is the typical person that is one of the typical persons that I would meet on Thoughtful Chat. So when I go on the text platform, what happens is that I get people like Amy who has problems like this and they text me. And so then it's my job to help them to build resilience, to build the right ways to adapt, right? So if you could relate to Amy, then let's see how we could help Amy and maybe help you as well. Now, here's a general model that I normally use. Now, it's called the Perma Model. It was formulated by Dr. Martin Seligman, who's like the founder of positive psychology. Now, the Perma Model actually has 5 aspects over here. So the acronym is PERMA. P is positive emotions. E is engagement. R is relationships. M is meaning. And A is achievement. Now, the idea is that when you want to be resilient, it's not just a one-dimensional thing. You've got to look at all these different areas of the PERMA model and try our best to work in all those different areas. Yeah, so it's I would say it's not, happiness is not something that you stumble upon by chance. It's something that can be created as you go along. It's something that can be proactively worked at. Yeah, and happiness is not just about feeling good. There's a bigger picture to that, which we'll go through in a bit. Now, let's look at the first aspect of the PERMA model, and that's positive emotions. Now, as you can see, if you're able to see my slides, what you would look at is that there's like 3 happy smileys versus 1 sad smiley. And what it generally shows is that you need at least about 3 positive emotions to counteract 1 negative emotion, right? And negative emotions are, in a way, they're a lot more potent. They're a lot more stronger than positive emotions. All right. So why you might wonder why is that so? Well, here's the deal. Positive emotions help you thrive. They help you become better than you are. Negative emotions have, in a sense, a more central role to your survival. In other words, negative emotions determine whether or not you live, right? Now, let me give you an example for this. Now, imagine you're walking across the street, right? And a car is coming at you like really fast. Now, what would you do? What's the typical thing that you do? If you're feeling all positive about it, you're probably not going to be able to move out from that situation fast enough, right? So that's where it's important to actually have that sense of anxiety, a little bit of fear, so that you could move out. The problem is when negative emotions are too much, when your entire day is being flooded by negative emotions, then it becomes counterproductive. So in the case of Amy, let's look at Amy, right? In the case of Amy, what's happening is that she's feeling lonely. She's feeling a little bit distressed. She probably has not much people that she could speak to. And this is difficult for her, right? So what I would typically do with Amy is that I'm going to ask her to think about 3 good things that has happened to her recently. And I'll ask her to be in that moment, to experience those 3 good things. And how does that feel like to her? So the idea is to get her flooded with with positive emotions, so that she's able to experience those emotions within her. And the thing about positive emotions is it's not just about feeling good. It actually determines the way you act. So here I have a set of 10 positive emotions that a person could possibly feel. Now, when you feel any one of these emotions, it's going to create a set of actions that are specific to that positive emotion. For instance, the feeling of joy creates the tendency to play. So you're going to be all playful and bubbly and stuff like that. Now, if I were to feel enough joy every day in my relationships, what's going to happen is I'm going to be a little bit more playful in certain times of my day. And that's probably going to lead to, if done correctly, it's going to lead to a kind of stronger connections being formed, right? And likewise, all these different positive emotions, they're attached to a set of. So if I could get Amy to feel these emotions, it would hopefully modify the way she acts. And that would hopefully lead to a much better place, right? So that's positive emotions, really. It's not really about the way you feel. Well, although it starts from the way you feel, but ultimately it has to get to the point of action. It has to modify the way you act. Yep. Next. Engagement. Now, this is also another interesting part of the whole process. Well, there are 3 characteristics of engagement or flow, right? As Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, I hope I'm saying his name correctly. So that's the person who founded this concept of flow. So what exactly is flow? What exactly is engagement? Engagement is when you're able to do something, and when you're doing it, time stops for you. You've got absolutely no feelings, no positive, no negative emotions whatsoever. And there is complete engagement. You focus on the task and that's it. And before you know it, it's already nightfall. Have you ever had such experiences? Have you ever experienced being so focused on something that before you know it, it's already nightfall and you didn't even realize, you didn't even feel time passing by? If you have any of such experiences, I would really like to hear from you. Just type a yes maybe on the chat platform. Yep. So that I know that I'm speaking to people who have experienced such things, and I'm not going completely lost here. Now, here's the thing. When you have moments of such engagement, although you don't feel anything at that moment, that's actually a plus point, because it means that whatever anxiety or negative emotions that you have, it's going to be sort of alleviated for that moment of engagement. Which means that if I could have more moments of engagement throughout my life, and let's say I'm depressed or whatever it is, facing bouts of anxiety, if I could have more moments of engagement in my life, it means that I'm going to feel less pain, right? Overall, I'm going to feel less pain. That's one. But it's also the fact that when I look back at my productivity in terms of the thing that I've done, if it's something that's useful, when I look back, I'm going to feel positive emotions because I've successfully focused on a task that I enjoy doing, and I'm actually doing it really well, right? So how exactly do you get to this point of engagement? So when Amy comes to me, I'm going to ask Amy a few questions. One of it would be, have you ever experienced any time in your life where you've done something and you're so focused on doing it that you've got absolutely no feelings at that moment? Time stops for you. You don't even realize, you don't even see time passing by. And then you're just completely engaged in that task. Has there ever been a moment like that for you? Right? So that's pretty much one of the questions that I would be asking Amy. The idea of asking Amy that question would be so that she would be able to look back at her life, she'd be able to reflect back and identify those things that she could repeat. Again, it's really simple. It's like, if something has worked for you in the past, take note of it and repeat that, because if it has worked before, there is a chance that it might work again. It's not 100%, but there is a chance that it might work again. So that's the first aspect of identifying this flow moments in your life. So that's one. Now, the other thing is that ideally, if something is too challenging, it's going to result in a lot of anxiety. Now, as you know, Amy is facing some kind of anxiety because she's sort of cut off from her work, and she tends to feel that she's not good enough, right? Now, that's pretty much what it is. Amy probably feels that her skills are not enough for the task, right? And this could be artificial. It could be that she does have enough skills. It's just that she needs to be reminded of her skills, which is the next part, which is on achievement. But again, if you've got too much of challenges, if your challenges are outweighs your skills, then you're going to feel anxiety. The other extreme would be if your skills outweigh the challenge. So you're really good at this, but it's become, you're so good at it that it's become so easy for you. And that's a problem, because when it's too easy, it leads to boredom. So if you look at the graph, there's anxiety on one end, boredom on the other. The trick is really to find the balance between your skill and the challenge of the task that you're doing, right? And if the task is just the right amount of challenge and you have just the right amount of skill, then you're in flow, right? And it's not easy. It requires a lot of reflection to see when were the moments that you've been through that. But it also requires a little bit of trial and error. So you need to try new things to see if that works for you. Yeah. So that's typically what I do. First thing is I'd ask Amy to look back at her life, look for moments of flow and see if you can repeat that. The next thing I do is to look forward and ask Amy, what are new things that you could try out, and see if those new things could sort of create that experience of flow for Amy. Right. So next, relationships. Right. So I think if you still recall, I mentioned that there's two aspects to resilient adaptation. The first one is external. The second one is internal. Relationships are very much focused on the external aspect to some degree, although it does affect the internal aspect. It affects the way you feel, but it's also primarily about how you interact with people. Yeah. And relationships are, I trust that you know this by now. Relationships are things that you need to nurture. They don't just happen, and they can't just be sustained by wishful thinking, right? It requires active nurturing. Yeah. So if you look at the questions that I have on those bubbles, those are roughly the questions that I would ask someone like Amy. So what I'll get Amy to do is I'll get Amy to reflect and list down all the positive relationships that she has in her life. Now, if you're joining me right now, and if you're thinking of any, perhaps you could make that list by yourself as well. What are some of the positive relationships that you have? Is it with your mom? Is it with your family, your parents, your dad, or your loved one? Right? It could be anyone. Now, those positive relationships are important because they make you feel good. That's one. But it's also because they sort of form that support system that you can rely on. So those are the relationships that you need to nurture. And nurturing those relationships are an active process. It's not something that you just wish would happen and then you just hope that someday you'd wake up and things would be great. No, you've got to actively list down those relationships and see if you could work on them one by one. Yeah, and then the last bubble over there would be, how do you deal with toxic relationships? That's also something that requires a little bit of strategic planning. So, well, I'm not going to be able to go into much detail about that because it's really on a case-to-case basis. But if you look at it, the I would say the basic principle is that look back at how you've done it before and look for what works, right? Most of the time, there might be something that you've done before, even if you had 10 experiences of failure and one experience of success. What exactly about that experience of success that can be repeated, right? So what is the best way you have dealt with toxic relationships in your life? Now, that's something you could think about as well. Now, if you've noticed the approach, right, it's really an approach of reflecting. You're looking back at yourself and you're asking yourself what works. So it's basically reflection, emotion, action. These are the three components that are involved. Emotion, of course, is supposed to result in action, but ultimately, it's like when you reflect, emotions come in, and then you act. At the end of the day, it's all about action. So taking action is really the end goal of anyone using the Perma model in that sense, right? So, yeah. Let's see. Next, and this is a little bit more complex. It's on meaning. Now, the question of meaning has become quite cliche. If you're with me, you'd probably understand this. Now, it's become like a catchphrase. What's the meaning in life, right? And to which a lot of people would answer, there is no meaning. And some would answer, they would give you a very specific sentence that they believe to be true, but it's not. Perhaps it's not really effective because we've not really broken down meaning to its smaller psychological aspects. So what I'm using here is called the pure model. Now, first of all, it's about purpose. So there's 4 aspects of the pure model: purpose, understanding of self-understanding, responsibility, and enjoyment. Now, the other word for enjoyment is evaluating where you are at. So enjoying the journey is about evaluating where you're at. Now, back to purpose, right? What is purpose? Purpose is really about formulating a goal. So when Amy comes to me, if I'm looking at giving her a sense of meaning, I'm going to ask her a simple question. If things went well for you, if things went exactly the way you wanted it to, in 3 to 5 years from now, how do you imagine your life to be? Right? Just think about that question for a bit. How do you imagine your life to be? Now, if Amy came to me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask her to write down exactly in as detail as possible what she imagines her life to be if things went just the way she wanted to, right? And if you do that exercise, what's going to happen is you're going to be able to understand your own motivations, your own goals in a way. And that's going to create motivations because it's going to give you something to move towards. Now, one of the objections that I get from a lot of my clients is, why bother thinking about the future, right? What's the point when you know it's not going to happen anyway? And in a way, they're right, because you can't have what you imagine to happen 100%. It's probably not going to happen, right? But in a sense also, I think that objection misses the point. Now, the reason why I feel it misses the point is this. Number one, when we have a goal, it's not about the future. It's not about the future. You're imagining the future, but what it's really doing is it is changing the present, right? The moment you have a goal, what happens is that dopamine is released. It sort of influences goal-directed behavior. And then you feel that surge of energy. You feel like you're motivated to move towards something because you have something to move towards too, right? So the idea is that it doesn't matter if that thing happens or not. What's important is that when I have a plan for the future, I'm going to be able to move now, right? So you need a target so that it enables you to move. So it's not really about the future. Now, second, it's also the fact that, yeah, you're right. You might not reach 100% of what you aim for, but there is a chance that you might reach at least 10%. And 10% is a lot different from 0. When you have no goals, there's almost a certain guarantee that you're not going to get anywhere, right? And that's definitely not the right strategy. So yes, you gotta think of the future. You gotta have a set of goals. Now, second is to understand yourself and to understand the situation where you're in. Now, in the case of Amy again, she's currently in a situation where it's not really her fault. I would say 90% of the problem that she's going through is not really her fault. There's a global pandemic, and she's isolated from her normal work environment. Things are new, things are different. But if Amy could recognize the strengths that she has, right? Her own resources, if she's able to see what she's good at doing, what she enjoys doing, she would be able to sort of play out on those resources and work them through in her daily life. So if, let's say, Amy figures out what she enjoys doing, like if she enjoys maybe watching Netflix, she could deliberately set a specific time to do that. Now, if Amy recognizes that she's probably very good at writing, she could have like a particular set of time doing exactly that, right? And the thing about this is that these exercises, they also create positive emotions, because once you're done, you'd feel a little, you'd really feel good about yourself. And that actually matters, right? It actually helps you to move forward. So the other thing about understanding, about self-understanding, is also to be able to understand who you are when you show yourself to people, and who you are behind that curtain, right? Behind, when people are not watching you, who are you, right? So oftentimes there are parts of us that we'd like to hide and we'd like to keep away, but these parts of us are also us, right? That those parts are also important. I'll give you an example. So we all like to think of ourselves as pretty decent people, but let's imagine you're driving on the road, and suddenly some guy comes and cuts right in front of you. That anger that you feel, that the feeling that I just want to kill that guy. Now that anger is also a part of you. Have you had a discussion with that part of you? Have you integrated that part of you into yourself? Now that's a discussion that I would be having with Amy, or with anyone for that matter, because if those negative or those shadow parts of you are not properly integrated, it's going to create a lot of mess and chaos when things are not going well for you. Yeah, so that's part of self-understanding. Now, the third aspect of this is to take responsibility. Now, taking responsibility is really about empowering yourself. In the case of Amy, 90% of what's going on is not her problem. It's not something that she can control. But there is probably just 10% of that which she can control, right? And having 10% that you can control is better than having 0% that you can control. So it's important for you, when we're going through times of crisis, it's important for us to note what exactly is it that is under our control. And then we only work on that circle of influence that we have, right? And the fact is, based on my experience on myself, as well as the clients that I've met, your circle of influence actually expands. And before you know it, you're getting a lot more responsibility, and with that responsibility comes power. So if you're familiar with the Spider-Man quote, right? With great power comes great responsibility. I think that the reverse is also true. I think that with great responsibility also comes great power. So if you're feeling powerless, perhaps all you got to do is look back at your life and look at those moments where you can take charge, and take charge of them, right? And these could be really small moments. It could be like it could be just as small as, like, I remember for myself, like when I was going through a very low period, all I could think of doing was cleaning out my car, and my car is really messy. So it was a really small thing that I started out doing, but it created a lot of positive emotion, a lot of movement, right? And so so is there something that you could do, a really small thing that you could do that could get you started, that could get that domino effect kicking in, right? So think about that. You could share that on the chat as well. Is there something small that you could do, that you should do, and but you've been neglecting that for a long time? Maybe today is the time that you could actually go back and try to fix that, try to do that, right? And last but not least, the word here is enjoy. It says enjoy the process and the journey. To be honest, I find that to be a cliche, because, like, enjoy the process, what does that even mean? A more suitable word would be to evaluate the journey, to evaluate where you are at this moment, right? So if you're already doing all those things, how do you feel about doing all those things? How do you feel about formulating your own goals? How do you feel about having that additional self-understanding? How do you feel about taking responsibility? How do you feel about cleaning your car, right? right? How do you feel about those little things that you're doing to put your life back in order, right? So when you reflect on how you feel at the moment, what you're doing is you're enjoying the journey. So enjoying the journey in a more technical sense means to evaluate where you are at. Yeah. Right. So if you have any questions on that, please do feel free to put that on the chat section. Uh, right. So I'm going to go on to the last part of the PERMA model. Now, this is the part on achievement, right? So here's the thing. The idea of looking back at your achievement is twofold. One is that when you look back at the list of your achievements, it creates positive emotions. Now, think about it. What are some of the things that you did and you did well in the past 6 months, maybe? Can you think of some of the things you did well? Can you think of some of your successes, some of your skills? Now, that's the exact question that I would be asking Amy. So when Amy comes to me, I'm going to ask her to take some time to list out some of the things that she's done really well in the past 6 months or recently, right? And the idea of listing down the successes, number one, is that it's going to make you feel good. But number two, and I think this is the part that's least stress, is that it's actually about self-respect. Because I don't know about you, but if I look at a person who has a list of successes and who has a list of skills, they're really good at doing some things and they're really successful at some things, right? If I look at that person, I'm going to have a lot of respect for that person because I think this is a person who's capable, right? Now, if you're able to look at yourself as though you are a person who has all those successes and who has all those skills, it not only leads to positive emotions, it also helps you develop self-respect. You would start looking at yourself in a different way. It's like, this is not just a person to be messed with. This is a person you need to respect, right? And that's going to change the way you behave with yourself and with others, right? So I think, one of the things that people tend to talk a lot about these days is self-care, right? So we talk about self-care. And then I feel a little sad about this because it's like, yeah, I mean, self-care is about taking care about yourself. But sometimes it becomes too extreme to the point that self-care is all about eating that ice cream or eating that chocolate or taking that day, taking a bath, going to the spa. That's I mean, I agree that that is part of self-care, but that's not it. That's not all of it. What really entails self-care, or rather I would say what's an additional component to self-care, is to develop that sense of self-respect. You've got to see yourself as somebody who's capable, right? And when you do that, you tend to really love yourself, like in a healthy way. It's not distorted self-love, but you actually love yourself in a healthy way when you realize that you're somebody that is capable of doing something. And one of the ways to do that is to look at yourself as a third person. So you look at yourself as someone else who has gone through all those lists of successes and who has accumulated all that skill. And that should tell you a lot about yourself. Yeah. And right, so that's achievement. Now, that's pretty much it. I'm gonna summarize a little bit about what we've done. So, as a recap, the framework of resilient adaptation it involves external resources and internal resources. It's not just about changing what's in your head. It's actually about building connections in the outside, in your direct environment as well. And how do we do that? How do we practice resilient adaptations? It's by using the PERMA model. So we focus on these 5 things: positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. Right, so that's pretty much it. Now, and that's the end of the first part of my talk today. Now, I'm going to take the next 15 minutes or so to try and answer some of the questions that are posed. If you have any questions, this would be a good time to actually put those questions out there. And we'll try to talk about some of these aspects of things. And maybe it'll be good if you go through it like sort of like a case study, right? And we could really focus on the different elements of the PERMA model as well. Now, while you're doing that, I would invite you to, if you can see the screen right now, basically what's on the screen is that the Thoughtful Chat is giving you a free 7-day trial with the promo code that you can see on your screen. So that's Hello Try TFC, HELLO TRY TFC. So I'd suggest that while you're at it, you could just download the app right now and try it out for free. Right. So one of the questions that I have over here is that how would you deal with a situation where you're not really sure what's it's like. So the question is on engagement. It's on flow. So basically, what if the thing that gives you flow isn't something very productive? How does that work, right? So I would say, well, you see, the thing about flow is that it's not always something that's productive. It's not always something that has to do with work. Sometimes video games could also give you a flow effect, and that's fine. That's fine, provided that you're able to manage your time pretty well. So what we really need to do right there is you still need to incorporate the whole. You still need to put in time for flow in your daily schedule. But of course, you can't be playing video games all the while, right? So you're going to have to manage your time pretty well. And I would also encourage you to look at the productive things that you've been doing that makes time stop, right? So then it hopefully would be able to balance out that feeling. Yep. Right.
Your Q&A section, just
Hi.
to also say thank you so much for a wonderful sharing in the beginning, to learn so much a little bit about resilience. So I think for our audience, I like how you put, at the beginning where you talk about the emotions, like the 3 positive emotions versus one of it. So my question is, how do we actually use this? When do we practice these 3 good things? That, like, do we do it anytime throughout the day? Like, when would be the best time?
Okay, that's a good question, Ivy. Now, the thing about positive psychology exercises is that it's really a matter of frequency. So ideally, I would say if you could do it more throughout the day, that would be great, right? But if you can't do it more, then I would say have a fixed time in your schedule. So it could be the first thing you do in the morning, or the last thing you do at night, or it could be sometime in the middle of the day. If you ask me, I would say that the timing really doesn't matter. What really matters is the frequency. So you got to do it more. And the more you do it, the more likely it would have an effect. Now, the idea about this is that you see, it's not just about having that positive emotion. It's about making use of the action that comes out from that positive emotion. So let's say I'm feeling a lot of joy. I'm going to feel a little bit playful. I'm going to move around, jump around, and disturb people. Now, if I feel that in the midst of a group of friends, right? And if I do it properly, that could lead to a little bit of maybe some playful conversations, which could strengthen the bond in that friendship. Yeah. So it's really about the action. So it's like the emotion's going to lead to a set of actions, and I'm going to need to have a lot of those actions throughout my day so that I would act out in the right way. So I would say do it more. Yeah, that would be my take.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. So there's no specific time of the day. So sometimes, like, maybe I think one place that I would practice it would be probably before I go to bed, like before I unwind my day, probably to just look back on things that are working well today, right? I think you mentioned it doesn't have to be something big. It's just something that meant well and it's positive, right, at the end of the day. Okay, that's good to know.
I also normally try it in the middle of my day. I mean, in the end of the day, yeah, of course. That's when you have the most time, I would say. But I would also try it in the middle of my day because that's when it gets the most stressful. So it's like at the peak, and I need to take some time off to ground myself, to just come back, and that's when I would try to practice it.
Okay, that's good to know. So let's see if our audiences who are still watching and catching up with us here have any more questions. Feel free to jump right in and give John any thoughts, comments. So John would be happy to kind of address them, right? So what do you think about resilience, John, as this topic? You're sharing something very important because we've all been through the past couple of months, going through the transition and the pandemic. A lot of things have become very uncertain, but I guess we're finally going back to some normalcy. But what's it for you as you're sharing and talking about resilience?
What's it for me as I'm sharing and talking about resilience?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that I find resilience to be a topic that's coming out a lot more, because I think we're at a moment where we're as a human race. I think we are united in stress at the moment, because I think a lot of people, a lot more than before, they're just going through all kinds of stressful situations. So from the way I look at it, I would think that we are a little bit more interested in how do we be more resilient. So like for me, I would say that even personally, I'm at a point where when the pandemic happened, a lot of uncertainties cropped up in my work and family and stuff like that. So there's a lot of uncertainties that cropped up, and I had to be able to ask myself, what is it that about all these things that I can control, right? And in a way, you're at a point where there's actually not much that's in your control. Given the pandemic situation and all that, there's not much that's in your control. But that's also kind of good in a way, because it means that you've got less things to focus on. So all you got to do is focus on the things that you can control, right? So the positive aspect of that is that, yeah, well, I don't have 10 different things that I could focus on. I could only focus on one, but maybe I could do that properly. Maybe I could do that right. So yeah, I think resilience is like, resilience is really, I would look at it as it's sort of like a skill, and I think that it's a skill that is much needed at this time.
So I'm hearing yourself practicing the Perma model as you're saying this. You're sort of trying to do that from your day to day as well, to ensure that you too continue to build that resilience throughout the transition.
Yeah, I'm trying my best actually. Although I would say this quite openly, so that for those of you who are trying and struggling, you would know that you're not the only one. It's not easy to keep that flow, right? It's not easy to keep that schedule of practicing. So every now and then I might feel like I'm not going to do this today, and I might not do it today. But yeah, that's the point.
So correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm also hearing from the sharing of your Perma model, at some point I also feel like acceptance is also one of a trait, right? For us to also kind of also build resilience. I mean, do you resonate with the word acceptance?
Yeah. So acceptance is it's actually, if you look at the whole Perma model, right? Acceptance is like interspersed within the whole thing. So for example, positive emotions, it's when I try to experience positive emotions, what that really is that it's about accepting the emotion itself, which a lot of people have problems with, because they feel like one of the problems that one of the objections that I get when we talk about the Perma models, that think about 3 good things that happened to you today. Nothing could happen to me today, right? So I would look at that as a kind of like a bias, right? Which is a common thing. It's a negativity bias. So I'm going to see all the negative things more clearly. I'm probably not going to see the positive things at all. So accepting the fact that you could also experience positive stuff in your life, that's part of the positive emotion aspect of it. But it's also about accepting the negative parts of your life as well. So that's where taking responsibility comes in. That's where the idea of meaning, it's not just about doing the easiest thing that you could possibly do. It's actually about accepting that things aren't as good as you think it is, and then ask yourself, what is the role that you can play in that, right? So yeah, acceptance is across the whole Perma model, all through it, I would think. Yeah.
Okay, that's really good to know that, because I think most of this the sharing of the Perma model really resonated with me, and I think we have a comment here. Voice Malaysia said, "I got myself new purposeful hobby like cycling. Lots of joy." Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, so new hobbies are, one of the things is that when a lot of people got cut away from the outside world, one of the things I've been dealing with my clients, is that I've been helping them to find new ways to cope. So one of that is to find new hobbies, hobbies that involve not going out, that involve staying at home, hobbies that involve social distancing, which is, it can be quite a challenge, but it's yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it's sort of like a healthy challenge to your own creativity, So yeah, so great Voice of Malaysia, great.
Yeah, and also I think that's probably related to the three good things that I think West Malaysia say. I also ask for prayer requests, be mindful to count blessings, and good health. I think this is really great, right? This is something along the line that you mentioned about three positive things to share and be having thankfulness and gratitude for, right?
Right. So, like prayer, for instance, like spirituality, whatever
Mm-hmm.
religion you may be in,
Mm.
spirituality is actually very much associated with positive emotion and resilience as a whole,
Mm.
right? So it's really a way to cope as well. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, thanks for sharing. We're enjoying your comments, West Malaysia. Yeah, hiking into nature is also very refreshing. So indeed, yeah. So like John, you shared about like going out, taking on new hobbies. So
Mhm.
yeah, this is really 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 nice to hear the comments coming in. Yeah.
I mean, it's great that we can finally hike, and we can
Mm-hmm.
finally cycle. Like there was a point where we can't even go out of our place, our house, and yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Nice. So I think, I mean, I like how you share about the concept of resilience, and also I tied in a little bit about the acceptance. So I think for our audiences today, if there's any more, questions or comments, or like, what would you like to know about John's sharing a little bit about resilience, feel free to drop your comments in the chat box. We'll be happy to kind of take these questions. So I think the topic of resilience is really wide, right? So I mean, there's a lot of focus. We can also talk about resilience at workplace, right? Lots of transitioning happens right now that a lot of us are somewhat working from home, or transitioning back to the office, right? So with this, I mean, Amy was a really great example. Would you say this is something that you commonly now take on in your cases? Yeah.
Yes. Actually, I mean, with thoughtful, if I were to be honest, I think I would say about a good 60% of the people I face have pretty much the same problem as what Amy does.
Mm.
So it's really about adjusting to a sudden change. That's basically what it is. Like things have suddenly changed. I had a routine. I had things that I was going through, and then now everything's gone. Right. So it's really about rebuilding that structure, and in a way, it's about managing the anxiety of the unknown. Right. So there's a lot of things that's unknown, but you can't possibly know everything. So it's really about managing that, and that's what we do through text actually. And I find that quite effective. When I first came into this whole text counseling thing, I would say a little bit skeptical because I've never done it before. And how does text counseling even work, right? Like there's like no facial expressions whatsoever. But surprisingly, it does. I've seen a lot of transformation taking place through the whole text counseling platform, and I think it's amazing. It's amazing that it can be a workable experience. Yeah.
And I think this is really well timed. Voice Villagers say that always reach out to others and seek help when needed is thoughtful. So this is exactly where you're just sharing that people are actually finding the comfort in some ways to reach out, right? Which is why the work through the platform where you are actually doing the actual texting platform really reach out to the whole public mass who really feel like I need to be connected. I want to stay connected because everyone is distancing from each other. So that's really, really timely of this comment. And thanks, Voice Malaysia, for also sharing this comment. And John, yeah, the work that you do, I think it's admirable that you have done, moved the whole, I guess, the workspace to online, digital, to kind of also support the rest of us here, the folks here who will need to kind of reach out to ensure that, continue to work together. Yeah.
Yep. We do what we can. Yep.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. What about anyone else who still have questions? I think for me, what would when I think about resilience, I always have this concept of like we have to, it's always something that we build and hone our skills throughout. So sometimes people who think about resilience, there's this misunderstanding that, oh, we are born with it. And you mentioned about it earlier, right? Because we do learn from different experiences, and that kind of also shape who we are. And is there any different between resilience and grit? If you know about the differences.
Right. That's actually a good question. To be honest, I'm not very familiar with the concept of grit,
Mm, mm, mm,
but from what I understand, the thing about personality factors, I could comment a little bit on the personality
mm,
factor aspect of it, not really on
mm-hmm,
grit because I don't really
mm.
know much of it. But
Sure.
the personality aspect factor would be that you see we have a stable set of personalities that are more or less stable. Of course, they change slightly
Mm,
as you
mhm,
age, but then more or less they are stable. So for those of you who are familiar with the five personality factors, so
mm,
we've got that, but then those things don't necessarily guarantee resilience. So you can't say that there is a resilient personality. No, not really. Different personalities they give you access to different sets of strengths, and these strengths, when used properly, they could allow resilience at different times, right? So it's really resilience is really about how you act. It's not so much about your tendencies to act. So personality is really about your tendencies, whereas resilience is really about the outcome, the action, right? So there is a space between your tendencies and your actions, and that's really the space where intervention takes place. So when
mm,
you talk about the Perma model and all that, what they're really trying to do is they're trying to fill up that space between your tendencies and your actions. Because if you just follow your tendencies, things are going to go really messy for you. So with that PERMA framework, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make you practice certain things that you could do to avoid your disruptive tendencies from influencing your actions too much.
mm.
So that's pretty much it. It's basically training you to practice uh, doing the right things so that you could be a lot more happier or you could be a lot more resilient. Yeah,
Mm.
that's pretty
So
much what
that's
it.
the five personality traits that you just mentioned, right?
No, the five traits would be well, openness, conscientiousness. Let's see if I can do this. Agreeableness, neuroticism. What's E? Extroversion. Yeah, that's right.
Ah,
That's
okay.
five.
Okay, yeah, for all the audiences out there, so they know like, oh, this is something, it's out
It's
there.
the
Ah.
yeah, it's the big five personality traits. So that's actually the big five model is one of the most widely used model in research because it has
Mm-hmm.
a lot of empirical backing. So it's been repeated statistically. It's been sort of validated across different cultures, different societies.
Mm,
With of course, there's some I would say some contentions here and there, but overall, it's a pretty stable model. So you could Google that. You Google the
mm.
big five model.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that. So we do have our last comment from Voice of Malaysia here. Says sometimes the tough season will pass. Just hang on there. Be hopeful always. Thank you for such an
Thank you.
encouraging, warm statement. Really appreciate it. So I think yeah, we are going to do one more question. And then I think John, you're probably going to share a little bit about the thoughtful I think top promo code that we have here to sort of wrap up the session for the rest of the audiences who's joining us or just joined us. Yeah.
Yep, I could do that. Yep.
Mhm.
So last question.
Okay. So I think let me see. We are just scrolling up and see comments. All right. Okay. It looks like we are good to go. We are going to wrap up. So John, take it away to wrap it up.
All right. So, and that's all the time we have for today. Now, I would like to once again thank everyone for attending, and thanks again to Common Ground for this opportunity. And if you haven't already done it, do try out the Thoughtful Chat app. It's free for 7 days. Now, the promo code is on your screen right now. It's Hello Try TFC. So it's HELLOTRYTFC. And that's basically it. So try your best. Try the platform for 7 days for free. Wish you all a restful night ahead. Take care and see you again.